Hi there, welcome to Campfire Fox Lists, where I list a few things and we talk about them. Enjoy. Deception 3 and Trapped. Tecmo's Deception series has always had a special place in my heart due to its weirdly dark humor-laced, demonic storylines and brutal, yet sometimes goofy ways you can torture your opponents in twisted Home Alone-style traps. Deception 3 Dark Delusion tweaked the gameplay of its predecessors, and even added a puzzle mode and the ability to make your own traps, as well as offering 4 different types of endings. It came out on the PlayStation 1 on March 1st, 2000 to fairly good reviews, but mostly flew under the radar of many gamers due to its late release after the announcement of Sony's brand new console, the PlayStation 2. 5 years later, there would be a sequel to Deception 3, but the problem is, not a lot of people knew about it due to its new title, Trapped. Trapped came out on November 1st, 2005 for PlayStation 2, and it got mixed reviews, cause you either had to love it or hate it. It continues the same type of gameplay we all knew and loved in the Deception series, but added vastly improved graphics, optional missions, and 3 official endings and a hidden 4th one. It also introduced new, very painful, and pretty funny death traps based on the environment of the room you were in, called Dark Illusions. The producer of the game was asked later why he called it Trapped, instead Deception 4, and he just simply stated that it was meant to be the start of a new series. Well, I ain't heard of any Trap 2 yet, so I guess it just didn't take off. I personally just stumbled onto this at the Toys R Us bargain section one day, and was actually more than excited when I realized it was a sequel to Deception 3. If I'd known that Trapped was a sequel all along, I probably would have bought it first day, as I'm sure many fans would have if they'd also known as well. Play this game if you haven't already, and you love the Deception series. Siren and Forbidden Siren 2. Siren was a stealth horror game released on the PlayStation 2 on April 20th, 2004, to alright reviews with many bashing the horrible controls and lackluster combat. The game had a very scary atmosphere with a very convoluted and creepy story, and introduced a new mechanic where your character could sightjack or see through nearby enemies' eyes to get a feel for how to avoid their walking routes or to solve puzzles. The gameplay is set up in stages and is told through the eyes of 10 different people, all around the same time but at different places, kinda like Pulp Fiction style, but kinda not. Graphics, though, racked it up for extra creepy due to the use of real human faces superimposed on the character models themselves, giving a mannequin-type uncanny valley effect. A rumor was that the commercials were pulled for giving kids nightmares over in Japan. I remember seeing this one a lot at GameStops and Game Crazy and the used game bins, and no one really ever buying them, even at $5 a pop. I personally loved the game, but it was hard as hell to finish. It was also frustrating to have to grab all the secret items and do the odd, weird secret things like unlocking some random door for a future character to pass through to continue the story. Also, the ending was kinda off. Anyways, 2 years later, there would be a sequel called Forbidden Siren 2. But unfortunately, us fans in North America would never get to play it. Forbidden Siren 2 came out in 2006 for Europe, Japan, and Australia, to, again, okay reviews. I was lucky enough to have played a copy in my travels. I wish I still had it. Forbidden Siren 2 improved on all the bad shortcomings, piss poor difficulty spikes, and clunky controls, as well as introduced a new kind of enemy that's weak to light. The story is hard to go into as there's so much to talk about, but it's creepy like the first Siren. And it too has this overbearing, uncomfortable, oppressive feeling that many good horror games and movies have. I don't know why it never came to North America, but I can assume it just didn't sell well here. However, if you can snag a copy or emulate it, I suggest giving it a go. You probably won't be disappointed. Clock Tower 3 and Haunting Ground. The Clock Tower series is one of my top favorites. However, there's an issue with its sequel numbering due to international release issues. The very first Clock Tower came out in '95 for the Japanese SNES, also known as a Super Famicom, but never came out to North America because of censorship issues. But its sequel was released in '96 for the PlayStation 1 in North America as Clock Tower 1, or just Clock Tower, which was my first taste of the odd series, and it was nothing short of amazing. It was kind of like finding a diamond in a bucket of old burnt banana peels. A horror point-and-click adventure game where your goal was to outsmart the killer that was chasing you was a breath of fresh air compared to the other popular shoot everything that moves games at the time. It gained cult status due to its creep factor and large number of endings that garnered a crappy sequel called Clock Tower 2: The Struggle Within, which I could go on into for hours ranting about, but I won't because I'm really here to talk about Clock Tower 3. Clock Tower 3 was released on March 18th, 2003 on the PlayStation 2 by Capcom to mixed reviews. This was the first time that Capcom and Sunsoft had helmed the series and brought it into the realm of full 3D graphics. Gone were the point-and-click sprites of the past and the weird semi-3D blockiness of the PlayStation 1 era. Unfortunately, so was the story, which in this game is a confusing, unscary mess that starts out kinda good, but unwinds really, really fast. The game consists of levels where you're chased by different killers like in the previous series. However, in this sequel, at the end of the stage, you go into a half-assed boss fight with your bow and arrow, that's magic, against the killer to contain him. Also, the hiding points are super sparse and hard to find, and it just ended up being a short, miserable, one-ending mess of a game that I truly regretted pre-ordering, as I hated it and I still don't have the best feelings for it. In fact, I even preferred playing the much hated Clock Tower 2: Struggle Within over this game. However, on May 10th, 2005, the real Clock Tower game everyone had hoped for had released under the new name Haunting Ground to mix to good reviews. The problem is it wasn't a Clock Tower game. Anyways, this game had the hide and chase mechanics down solid and featured a new gameplay mechanic in the form of a somewhat trainable dog called Huey. The story was much better, but really nothing new in the horror world, as you play as a girl who survived a car crash only to wake up naked in an old castle owned by a very sinister lord and bloodthirsty crazed servants. Eventually things take a turn for the worst, and you'll find yourself befriending an abused dog, and together you have to hide and outsmart your would-be killers while trying to solve puzzles, avoid death traps, and escape the castle. This features multiple endings, costumes, and boss fights, but they are nowhere near as frustrating as the previous entry. And while it's not officially a sequel to Clock Tower, I personally consider it to be, if that horrible crap that Clock Tower 3 can be considered one. This is one scary game that takes the best elements of Clock Tower 3 and melds them with the better elements from the old Clock Tower series. I highly recommend you pick up this game and play it by any means, especially if you love Clock Tower or a good horror game and are craving a special brand of hide-and-seek horror. Zombies Ate My Neighbors and Ghoul Patrol. Zombies Ate My Neighbors came out in September 1993 for the Super Nintendo to pretty great praise, but it wasn't really successful till many years later due to its cult weirdness and following. The game has you playing as either Zeke or Julie in one-player or two-player couch co-op against a load of horror movie parodies with strange weapons like soda cans, weed whackers, water guns, and popsicles, alongside things like rocket launchers, Uzis, and things like that, all in a semi-top-down shooter kind of game. You can even transform into a weirbeast and bash walls and people and enemies alike. The game is broken up into stages, and the goal is to save your idiotic neighbors before they get slaughtered by whatever monsters are around, and to find the exit after you either save or don't save them. The game has an amazing soundtrack and oozes B-movie campy goodness that I just can't get enough of. And the game still manages to make my top games of all times list. And so I was kind of shocked to learn that all these years later there was actually a sequel quietly released in late 1994 under the name Ghoul Patrol, also on the Super Nintendo. So I found it and gave it a shot. Ghoul Patrol fixes a lot of the problems of Zombies Ate My Neighbors, including better graphics, more quality of life enhancements, like pointing out where neighbors and exits are, varied enemies, actually a lot of enemies, smoother gameplay, and the ability to jump and slide. However, it's just lacking that charm and camp and pixels that made the prior one so good, despite everything kind of being improved this time around. The amount of levels are about the same, but I don't know if it's just because of how smooth it plays or if it just seems shorter, but it just all in all plays faster, and it just ends up feeling kind of unsatisfying in that regard. It had flown under so many gamers' radars, maybe due to the name change or maybe because it was rare, because I never saw it for sale or even at pawn shops I used to frequent as a kid. But it's a solid game and a welcome sequel nonetheless, and I think you should give it a try for yourself and see what you think of it, especially if you really, really enjoyed Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Thanks for sitting around and humoring an old fox and his tales. If you'd like more, please hit like and subscribe. And remember, nothing is more frightening than a fear you cannot name.